What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Tomatoito Boxing Show. Let's talk about the event that took place out in Costa Rica, headlined by none other than Yokasta Valle, the minimum weight unified or former unified champ that we all grew to appreciate and got somewhat on the bandwagon when she ended up signing up with Golden Boy. Remember the back and forth when Seniesa was under the Golden Boy banner, asking for that fight for years. To fight Yokasta Valle, and the fight wouldn't happen. Contractual disagreements happened. Negotiations fell apart between Seniesa and Golden Boy. She ends up parting ways, heading over to Top Rank, and Golden Boy moves on and signs up Yokasta Valle and brings her stateside. Shortly thereafter, they end up making that fight happen, which took place earlier this year, the big unification bout between Yokasta Valle and Seniesa Estrada, which was a top-rank event on the undercard of Oscar Valdez, Liam Wilson, out in the Phoenix area. It was a huge event. It attracted a lot of attention. If anything, it possibly attracted a lot of attention to equal that of what Valdez and Wilson had. Some feel that it should have been the headlining event, with Oscar Valdez being the co-main event, but of course Oscar has a bigger profile. Nonetheless, to say the least, those of you that watched the fight and those of you that didn't, go watch that fight. It was an entertaining fight between Seniesa and Yokasta Valle, which was an all-action fight, where those who were cheering for Seniesa Estrada will make the case that she had the better footwork, she had the better, the better selection as far as punch output. She was definitely the more composed and countered very well throughout the fight. Those of you that were upset with the decision that Seniesa Estrada became the minimum weight undisputed champion with by way of judges' scorecards, those of you that were cheering for Yokasta, then you fell in appreciation and would make the argument that she had more output, that she was throwing punches and bunches, going forward, a headbutt that caused a nasty cut on Yokasta Valle, but she fought through. She kept pushing forward and was landing, not at will, but was landing more often than not on Seniesa Estrada, at least the people that were seeing, and I was actually there live, and people were oohing and ahhing whenever Yokasta Valle was catching Seniesa Estrada, but then they would also appreciate and ooh and ah whenever Seniesa was catching her with these nasty uppercuts and these looping punches that she was able to put together and land on Yokasta Valle. So it was a fairly even matchup that did not reflect exactly what the scorecards read. A lot of people felt Yokasta Valle should have been named the winner, including in-house, where people were booing and cheering her on and booing the decision. Not booing Seniesa Estrada, but they were definitely booing the decision. And so she's looking for that rematch. She has since departed from Gloria Alvarado, from Coach G, and has moved on to train in Mexico with Jay Nahar, PANDA, the famed trainer who has gained prominence for having two killers on his side, Subriel Matias and William Cepeda, El Camarón Cepeda. There seems to be talks that Subriel Matias may be either partially involved with PANDA or maybe restructuring and resituating himself back towards Puerto Rico instead of training out of Mexico because of the distance that it created between him and his family. And this all came about after his recent loss to Liam Pero, where he lost his title to Liam Pero. Nonetheless, Camarón Cepeda's still there, and he's got a lot of prospects that he's building up and getting them into contendership in their respective divisions. Yokasta Valle made her debut with PANDA this past Saturday. And again, something else to touch on, in the lead-up, remember, Yokasta Valle was gaining attention when she was, and this was part of the back and forth between her and Seniesa, when she made the comment that you're selling out arenas and I'm selling out stadiums. You should come fight in Costa Rica, to which Seniesa was like, I have no business in Costa Rica. If you want to fight, we make the fight here in the U.S. Yokasta Valle just attracted pretty much the similar amount of fan base that Shakur was able to pull out in Newark a few weeks back. She pulled 8,000 plus as a headliner for a card that had about 12 or 13 fights that was an entertaining card with some decent names on it. Danielito Zorrilla, who, if you remember, he was a former opponent of Regis Prograis, who made Regis Prograis look not look very good. And a lot of people felt that Zorrilla did enough to have won that title and won that decision or won that fight against Regis Prograis, but the decision still went to Regis Prograis in what was his homecoming. And that was the night that he got scouted by Bill Haney and Devin Haney, and they chose to move up from 135 to 140, and starting with Regis Prograis as their first opponent. That was a big payday for Regis Prograis, but it was a hell of a fight that Devin Haney put together, where he lifts the WBC title from him at 140, and he announced his arrival to the super lightweights. Danielito Zorrilla knocked out Peña in crazy fashion and continues to maintain himself active and amongst the top opposition at 140 pounds. He was part of this undercard. Former Panamanian champion, WBA champion at 130 pounds, if I remember correctly, Jezreel Corrales was in action against Francisco Fonseca. Jezreel Corrales may not be a name that you recall. Those of you that are hardcore boxing fans, you'll remember that Jezreel Corrales was making a lot of noise. And this is at a time where the featherweight and the super featherweight division or junior lightweight division was kind of in a similar weird phase when Jezreel Corrales was champion, kind of like what we're seeing with the welterweight division nowadays, where it's kind of like a transitional period. Jezreel Corrales was a champion around that time, and he had weight issues between 122 to 126, 126 to 130. The weight issues was something that always plagued him, and he lost his title on the scale and went on to lose that fight to Alberto Machado, whom was the only one that was able to win the title on that night, because Jezreel lost the title on the scale, came in about 3+ pounds over. And Machado goes on and knocks him out. He's now campaigning at 140 pounds as well, and he fought Francisco Fonseca. A Francisco Fonseca who has a lot of experience in his resume, has been in the ring with a lot of good names. Some would say elite. Francisco Fonseca has 2 draws and 4 losses, with 33 wins now since he knocked out Jezreel Corrales in the 4th round. Francisco Fonseca has shared the ring now with Jezreel Corrales. Previous to that was Jesus Bravo, decent fighter, a journeyman fighter, 21-10 record. But he has losses. He lost by knockout to Ryan Garcia back in 2020. He lost to Tevin Farmer. He lost to Gervonta Davis when Gervonta Davis was on the come-up. He was 18-0 when he shared the ring with Francisco Fonseca. Gervonta was. Knocked him out. 8th round knockout. So he shared the ring with decent names. Tevin Farmer got a decision on him in 2018. Eusebio Osejo, a fighter that you see on a lot of resumes resumes of fighters that are making their way up. He's got 24 losses, 30-24, but he's usually like one of those fighters that they throw in as fighters are starting to develop, bigger names or blue chip prospects. But Francisco Fonseca now improves to 33-4-2. The 27th knockout of his career, has always fought subpar competition and fighters that are on the come up, because he's a tough, gritty fighter that will test the mettle of these new blue chip prospects. And now he fought Jezreel Corrales and knocked him out in the 4th round. That was a very even fight and good matchmaking on that one, because it was a winnable fight for both of them. Marisela Cornejo, 154-pounder. She came out with a victory as well. And Yokasta Valle's younger sister came out as well. Was also featured on that undercard. So Yokasta Valle, the curiosity was to see how she was going to look under the tutelage of PANDA. And this is her return since the decision defeat to Seniesa Estrada. She kept her mouth shut pretty much the entire time about the rematch and just wanted to let her hands do the work. She comes out and performed beautifully. Those of you that haven't had a chance, if you go to my YouTube channel, I've garnered a lot more interviews now, especially when I was out there earlier this month out in Ontario, California, and I got a chance to talk to Panda. And you can see the interview there where I talked to Panda and asked him about how he's looking at, if he's looking at changing the style of Yokasta Valle, someone who's an established fighter and one that has a style already and has her habits with her. If he was having to, if he wanted to change her style completely, or if he just wanted to implement some minor changes and tweaks. And that's exactly what he said. He said that you don't change fighters like that when they're established, when they're set in their ways. You don't change experienced fighters, but you do add to their arsenal. You do come up with some tweaks and some changes. And I encourage you to go watch that interview. And there's also some shorts on there about it, where he's enjoying training. He says he's trained female fighters before, but never a female fighter at this level in the game of boxing. And that's exactly what we saw from Yokasta Valle. Little tweaks, little changes to her style. She's hitting harder than I recall. Her defense is a little bit tighter, but she was also fighting a fighter that doesn't throw a lot of ammo in Ramandeep Kaur. She doesn't throw a lot of ammo downrange, but rather looping punches. So Yokasta had the center wide open to her, and she throws peppering punches down center, downrange, and that's how she was getting the best of Ramandeep Kaur. She looked a little bit stronger, like she was hitting a little bit harder. Those of you that would push back on that may say that it was a weaker opponent. Maybe. But she did look like she was very crisp in her punching. Her footwork didn't look too different. But it was all in the offensive. The way she's feigning, the way she's moving, the way she was varying her punches, these combinations that she was putting together, and the fluidity of the combinations looks to be something different than what we just saw earlier this year in March when she faced Seniesa Estrada. Which shows you something, that she's at the top of her game and she's very coachable. Because whatever game plan it was that Coach G had her apply and how they approached that fight with Seniesa, it was a good approach because it made it a really tightly contested fight and it was a scoring headache for the judges. But now she has this style that looks slightly different and a little bit more offensive, but a little bit more calculated as well. So let's see what she continues to look like. If she looks similar to what we just saw and we see some other refinements, then that's going to be very interesting in her next fight. Post-fight, she immediately called out Seniesa Estrada. Her manager went on and said that they're already in talks with Golden Boy to see if they could initiate talks with Top Rank once again and get Seniesa Estrada and get that rematch, which would be an even bigger payday. And if this does happen, this rematch happens, you bet your ass it's going to be a headlining event, or it will be a co-main to a big draw. Maybe it'll be like a co-main to a Virgil Ortiz future fight, or a Camarón Cepeda, or somebody who's a bigger name. But anybody lesser than that, you bet that they're going to be the headlining event, and they'll have a decent name as the co-main to back them up. It was a big draw the first time. Seniesa feels that the rematch is not warranted, but money talks. And Yokasta and her team feel, and a lot of the fans feel, that the rematch is warranted because it was a tight fight. A tightly contested showdown between the two. So congratulations to Yokasta Valle. She improves to 31-3-0, 10 knockouts to her credit. This is the 10th knockout of her career. And of course, we know Seniesa Estrada, if that does happen, well, she remains unblemished. 26-0, 9 knockouts to her credit. Has a hell of a resume already, Seniesa does. Holds the fastest knockout in boxing history. I believe it still holds, at least in professional boxing history, separating the men and women's divisions. Just in professional boxing history, she has that 7-second knockout. And it'll be interesting because Yokasta Valle was able to draw 8,000 plus in a soccer stadium out in Costa Rica. So it'll be interesting if they visit the idea of taking Seniesa outside of the U.S., but she's expressed that she doesn't want to leave the U.S. to fight anywhere else. She's made that very clear in the past. So that drawing power of Yokasta is going to put butts in seats, which means really good as leverage in negotiations, as does Seniesa Estrada, and she has the titles. We'll see if that's the next fight. I have a feeling that Seniesa is going to ice her out because there is a little disdain and hatred between the two. So I have a feeling that Seniesa will ice her out. The fight will not be next. If it is, it will be to my surprise, but I have a feeling that it will not be next for them. And so Yokasta, to keep establishing herself, she needs to go either to a different division, which I don't suggest, but she should take out whoever else is there in contendership, or at the minimum, she could fight Sarah Borman, who is the IBO champ. The IBO carries a little more weight in women's boxing than it does in men's, but you know that I always call it like the fifth major organization, not one of the 4 major organized or boxing organizations that is recognized worldwide. But the IBO is a organization based out of Florida that has had their belt around the waists of such greats as Bernard Hopkins and Andre Ward, Mayweather, Anthony Joshua, Triple G. The IBO is involved. Sarah Borman is the IBO champ for the minimum weight division. 18-1 German fighter. That would be a good fight for Yokasta Valle to go after that title. And continue competing at the top level of the minimum weight division as she waits for negotiations between her and Seniesa. So very, very interesting card that they had with some decent names that are still positioning themselves as gatekeepers within their divisions and contenders. Danielito Zorrilla for sure is still a live contender. Joshua Corrales, Francisco Fonseca are more like gatekeepers or journeymen within the 140-pound division. And Marisela Cornejo trying to establish herself as a who's who at the 154-pound division within women's boxing. So congratulations to Yoka Valle. She looked good under Panda's tutelage. And we'll continue pushing forward. Let's see what her career holds for her. And let's hope that we see her in the ring back in action before the year ends. And Seniesa as well. Seniesa Estrada holding and defending the throne now that she's the undisputed champion at the minimum weight division. If this does happen next, it will be to my surprise. But I will welcome it. And I just don't see it. There's too much disdain between Seniesa and Yokasta Valle, which makes for an even better storyline. If they were to face off against one another again. But I just don't see it happening. So I'd like to hear what you guys think. Feel free to leave me a comment. Again, same thing. You guys know that those of you that follow me on Instagram, you know that as soon as I post it on there, if I post a caption related to this episode, then you know immediately to go to the link in the bio and you'll find the episode there on Buzzsprout. And those of you that follow me on Apple or Spotify or whichever one your favorite is, iHeartRadio, Pandora, you name it, then you know how to find me there. And spread the word and continue downloading the content. I am beyond appreciative. And I'll continue working on my end to see what other content I could bring you. good content that I could bring you. And I'm always striving to fix, obviously, vocabulary and language and my approach and so forth. And for the sake of bringing you some good content with some fresh narrative and enjoyable content for you to be able to view and listen to. So I appreciate you guys. I'll check you guys out on the next episode, and thank you guys again once again for tuning in to the Toma Todito Boxing Show. Have yourselves a great night.